Hi, I'm Dr. Sharon Saline, and I got on a few minutes early today because I'm so excited. We have a great guest. Dr. Ari Tuckman is coming to join me to talk about working memory. This is one of my favorite topics. I think a lot of topics are my favorite topics, to be honest. But it's so important that we understand working memory and how it functions. It's a critical executive functioning skill that affects not just our recall, but also our emotional lives. So I'm here. I'm going to hang out for a few minutes, kind of blabbering a bit about this, that, and the other thing to make sure it's all working well. It's a beautiful day here in Western Massachusetts, which is really nice because yesterday with the smoke from the fires in Canada, it was kind of creepy looking outside. And it was creepy looking outside because the sky was like this orangey, yellow, gray. It just kind of weirded me out. So I see Ari is joining right now, and I'm going to ask him to join me, and we're going to start. I'm so excited, mostly because I just love talking about Ari about everything, and being able to offer this to you. Hi, Ari. How you doing?
I'm good, although we're hazy thanks to those rowdy Canadians here in
Are you?
Philadelphia. Yeah.
Oh, okay, because you got that today. So yesterday it was so odd. I was just this weird alter universe thing with the gray clouds, and it was sort of orange, and you walked outside and I could smell the smoke. That's what was
Mm.
so strange.
The
Very
end
strange.
times, they're coming.
I know. I don't watch these things about the end of the universe. I just
Yeah.
have to
La
live
la la la
la
la.
la la. But here you go, la la la. It's in my
Hmm.
yard, right? So anyway, I'm so excited that you're here to talk with me about working memory. Let's just start with something you're up to that you feel really excited about. What is it?
I don't know. What am I doing? I booked tickets for a conference in Toronto, which we'll be going to in September. So that's cool. I'm looking forward to that. So,
Awesome. That's
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Great. Let's see, in my world, well, I have finished chapter 6 of my book, which
Mm,
means I'm finished 7 chapters, because
nice.
chapter 9 is already written. So that leaves me with 3 more chapters. And
Okay.
after this, I'm launching right into social anxiety. So it's coming along, and I'm excited about that. And so let's talk a little bit about working memory. What
Hmm.
is working memory? Maybe, for me, what I understand I think about working memory is the computational space in our brain.
Yep.
So information comes in, and, working memory is some people say it's short-term memory, some people say it's long-term memory. It really, it's not short-term memory, because short-term memory is something comes in and it goes out right away, like you don't do anything with the information. And so working memory is almost like the tip of longer-term memory, because you have to hold on to it long enough to do something with it. What's your
Yeah.
definition?
I mean, I think I'll start by saying this, like memory is a lot of things, right? We have many kinds of memory. So when we say memory, it's like, yeah, as if it's all one kind, but there's not. There's a lot of different kinds of memory. So, but working memory, I kind of think of it as it's the memory that's working, right? And that what it does is it stores what we're paying attention to. So
Hmm.
as you're talking, I am taking in words and I'm holding them and I'm processing and I'm putting them together. And maybe also I'm thinking like, oh, I have a thought to say on what she said, but I'm going to hold it over here while I listen still over here. Right. And that's
Hmm.
my working memory. It's doing both of these things. It's taking in and processing. And ideally it's holding. I'm like, oh, right. That's the
Hmm.
thing to say. Or when you're like, oh, I have to go to the kitchen and get something. And then you're holding in mind while you navigate and do the things and like the dog and the kid and the whatever. And then you get to the kitchen and you're like, crap, what the hell was I doing here? Damn it, my working memory isn't working, right? So working memory is working all of the time.
And it is interesting because we're actually our sort of definitions are very aligned. Because when I think about working memory, I think about something comes into the brain and we have to do something with it, and then we have to put it out there. But we also have to remember it to do something with. And so they're similar in that, you know, something's coming in, you are doing something with it, and you're holding it simultaneously. And then if it matters to you or if it's important, it will then get transferred to your longer term memory so that you can pull it up next time.
Hmm.
Where working memory is hard for people with ADHD is in exactly that process. The
Yeah,
information comes in, I've got to hold it and do something with it and process it at the same time. And that, I think, is where people with ADHD stumble, and it's really kind of the core part of the core of
yeah,
having ADHD. Um, you know, because I think of ADHD as, you know, having consistently inconsistent motivation, and that's one part. But this part of being able to process information like that is so critical.
yeah. I mean, it is. And it can be sort of a death by a thousand cuts kind of a thing,
Hmm.
that when your working memory isn't working well, it's just all these little added stresses and whatever,
Hmm.
so that thing of like, damn it, I didn't bring my whatever to work today, or I left something, at the train station or at the restaurant, or I forgot to call that person back because I was caught up in the middle of something. I got interrupted, and
Hmm.
so I mean, there's countless examples of this, of all these ways that stuff adds up, and it takes a toll on your stress level, on how long it takes to get things done. It takes a toll financially in terms of like all the extra ways you have to pay more. Definitely takes a toll on your relationships and your standing within those relationships. So yeah, I mean, it's important stuff.
It is, and you know, it's interesting because I think that you know, so working memory is fundamentally related to processing speed, and processing speed isn't something we talk a lot about with ADHD, although I talk about it and you talk about it, but it's not part of the general conversation, you know, except if we're talking about slow processing speed. But in how we process information, you know, which is to me how we metabolize what we're taking in, is part of working memory. And when you have slower processing speed, it affects and is affected by
Yeah,
your ability to use your working memory. One of my clients said to me, I think she was like 12, she said, Dr. Sharon, it's like this. A file comes in my brain and the papers go everywhere and I start to pick up those papers. And then the next file comes in my brain
yeah,
and those papers go everywhere. And then the next file comes in my brain and those papers go everywhere. And I'm still working on picking up the papers from the first file. And so if you
yep,
have that going on simultaneously with, I've got to remember, I'm in a conversation. This person just told me their name. I need to remember their name. I need to listen to what they're saying, and I have to respond appropriately. And oh my God, I forgot their name already. Because
yeah,
I couldn't pick that file up fast enough. You know, that is going to create not just, it's going to create anxiety for you, which is then going to negatively impact your ability to recall anything at all.
yeah, yeah. It makes a bad situation worse. So,
Right.
um, yeah, and this has, there's obvious implications in terms of like students in class, whether you're in
Hmm.
first grade or med school,
Hmm.
but also as adults, and not just those random conversations. But, I just earlier this week, I met with someone and she described how during business meetings, right, she's really bad at staying focused and like taking information into working memory, processing it, knowing what to write down. She starts out good and then she like peters out because she just loses that ability to sort of to hold her attention and her working memory. So she just chats everybody up at the end to find out, like, hey, what do you think? Yeah, what did you get out of that? Right, which is actually a pretty good like compensation, right? Because she's
Yeah,
got good social skills. But
right.
it puts her at risk that maybe someone doesn't mention, oh, by the way, super important. You got to keep this thing in mind, you know?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think it kind of cuts at her sense of self in a way of like,
Sure.
why the hell can't I just remember and keep in mind and then like, whatever,
Hmm.
do something with it, you know?
Yeah.
So, so you get to that impact as well, that like sense of self.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. One of my clients says he writes like 87 million notes during the course of a meeting. Um, and then, everyone asks him, what actually happened in the meeting. And he would say, well, wait, no, this, I'm not the right person, because he's doodling and remembering with this,
Sure.
and he's, got a few rando words over here. And I think that, these are all sort of challenges that we see in daily life for people whose working memory is not working as well as they would
Yeah.
like. And I think maybe we could talk a little bit about, how we, what the effect of it is when you struggle with working memory at work, at school, in your relationships. How do you kind of, how people stumble, and then how do they recover?
Mm.
Because a lot of times what I see are people just apologizing. Oh, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. Oh, I mean, particularly women, I wish I
Yep.
did that better, and
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. Or what I see with men is like, oh, it's not that big a deal.
Yep.
So it's a kind
Sure.
of a little bit of a divided response. What about you?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And you know, the thing about apologizing is I don't know, like it's a socially helpful response, right? If you
Hmm.
realize, whoops, then an apology is a good idea. But it can sort of become a problem if you over apologize, right? Because then it feels awkward for the other person, right?
Hmm.
And then they're like, ugh, now I need to make them feel better about this, right? Which
Right.
makes more emotional labor for them. And also, depending on what the situation is, can kind of like, I'm the one who's frustrated here because you didn't do the thing you said you were due for me. And now I'm having to make you feel okay about the fact that I got disappointed, right? So if
Hmm.
you go too far with it, um, or it's just if you over apologize, I mean, just to be kind of blunt and honest, some people are kind of jerks, right? And they will take advantage of you apologizing a
Yeah.
little too much, right?
Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
so there, I mean, there's a bit of a sort of sweet spot there, depending on the situation you're in. But I think it's sort of apologize, but then make amends or offer amends. Like, ah, damn it, I forgot to do that. Okay, so what do we do about it now? Here we are now. Now
Hmm.
what do we do? What do you need me to do? What can I do? What are our options? Right. So it's sort of moving on to the next thing. And I think often if you give a decent enough apology and then you offer to fix it, it at least mostly repairs a kind of social impact.
I think you have to be careful though, because sometimes, um, you could give kind of a kind of gruff apology. Yeah, I did that. Okay, let's move on and let's
Mm,
fix the problem, blah, blah, blah. And that might minimize the
yeah.
effect of what happened on the other person. And I think that that comes from a lot of different places, which, we could circle back to. But I'm curious, you know, how do you think that stress and anxiety and overwhelm affect working memory? And are affected by it, because it's a two-way street, really.
Sure.
If your working memory is weaker than some of your other executive functioning skills, you will feel more anxious about whether
Yeah.
you're going to remember somebody's name, or if someone asks you a question, if you'll actually be able to recall the whole question or just the last few words, or are you going to remember, like you go to the grocery store and your wife, you go to the hardware store, your wife says, we got to fix our window, or
Mhm.
the screen is broken. Go to the hardware store and get a patch for the screen, and you come home with like a can
Everything
of
except the
paint,
patch. Yeah.
everything except that, right? So I guess I'd like to sort of segue into like, how do we kind of understand how this affects everyday
Yeah.
living? But then, like, what about stress and anxiety, or even depression? How do these
hmm
affect working memory?
And so the sort of mutually reinforcing circle between these is very real, right?
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
if you know you're not hitting the mark as much as you should, as much as you would like to, as much as perhaps
Mm-hmm.
people expect you to, then you're kind of reading the room correctly if you feel kind of anxious or depressed or stressed out or overwhelmed, right? Because like it is more work and it does feel bad. Um, and also all of those things. Let's actually throw in sleep deprivation. There's another good one, right?
Oh, that's a really
Ly-
good one.
yeah, yeah, lying in bed, remembering all this stuff you forgot to do. Great way to
Right.
not sleep. Also, by the
Particularly,
way,
like,
not
I don't know.
sleeping.
That happened to me today at 4 a.m. I was like, huh, okay, I guess I didn't think
Mhm.
about this enough during the day.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. So, and of course, being sleep deprived, like nobody brings their A game when they're sleep deprived. So it just, so you can get in this kind of like, I don't know, maybe death spiral is too big a word there, but like, it's just kind of sucks.
Yeah.
So, so I think it's a bit of a both and in terms of what do we do about it. I mean, some of it is do the things to support your working memory, which might be, taking notes and setting reminders and telling people, hey, if I forget to do this, just let me know. Or blah, blah, blah. I just answered your question. Did I give you everything? Is there anything else that you need? Right. So
Mhm.
taking active steps, and this is all easy to say, right? But, trying to get enough sleep and trying to, exercise and do all the things to take care of yourself and help your brain work at its best. And mix in a certain amount of acceptance, that like there is
Mhm.
a certain amount of this that's just going to happen. And that's going to be okay. I'm just going to deal with it when it happens. A certain amount of setting expectations as well. There's kind
Mhm.
of two ways to disappoint people less. One is to up your batting average. The other is to let people know, by the way, I'm not at my best. Did not sleep well last night. I got a lot on my mind. I will do what I can, but I can't promise you, right? And that is another way to be less stressed about it. And then your working
Mhm.
memory works a little better.
Yeah, I mean, I like that. I think that, one of the things that happens is that, we live in very stressful times. There's a lot of environmental stress right now in
Mm,
the news, and there's also, and when I think about environment, I mean the environment, and then there's
yeah.
actual, like, in our society right now,
hmm
and then, we have our devices. And one of the things, when I was thinking about this question, stress, anxiety, and overwhelm, one thing is, one of the biggest problems are how devices interrupt a
Yeah.
person while they're in a task. And, basically, our working memory can hold somewhere between 4 and 7 units of information. And so if you're asking yourself to hold 10 or 15 units of information, that's too many. So, like, if I said to you, Ari, my phone number is 586-6900.
hmm
What's my phone
Yeah.
number? You'll be able to say
Five eight
586.
six six nine hundred. I don't know,
Right.
maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Right. And then if I said, okay, what's my phone number backwards? right? Because you didn't hold on to it because it didn't seem important.
Sure.
And also maybe, you were thinking about something else or whatever. And it's that ability to basically hold on to something and flip it without having distraction interfere. And so the kind of stress that most of us experience are a series of interruptions. And
Yeah.
I was talking about this yesterday with a client who has a desk, and her boss sits across from her at the desk, and at the desk opposite her, and the other people, it's like a foursome desk thing.
Mm.
And and people are talking and interrupting, and all I kept visualizing is like what she needs are those little cardboard folder things that they give to kids
Yeah.
when they're in school, so that when she goes into a work block, nobody interrupts her. And I did talk about, I was like, I think we have to talk about like blocking your work and letting the people know that when you're in a work block, it would be better. Like you're going to work for 45 minutes. And if they have something, they can talk to you at the end of 45 minutes. Because
Hmm.
already part of her job is answering the phone. So she
Mm.
already has a persistent,
Sure.
unpredictable interruption. One of the things that's so interesting to me is in his book Focus, Daniel Goleman says that when you're interrupted in a task, it can take almost 10 to 15 minutes for your brain to reset,
Yeah.
really fully reset and get back into it. And I know most of us are thinking, "Oh, that's ridiculous. I can talk on the phone and prepare dinner and I can do more than one thing." But it's actually really taxing on your brain, because your working memory is extra working. You're
Sure.
actually taking information in, holding it, doing something with it. If you're trying to talk on the phone and make a recipe, how many times do you have to check that recipe to make sure
Yeah.
you're doing step by step the right thing versus if you weren't talking on the phone, where you had a chance to actually hold it? And I think that kind of information overload and interruption is part of what feeds the stress that people with ADHD live with, and with all of us live with, actually, because you're
Mm.
expected to be able to multitask. And I wondered if you could say a few things about multitasking and this idea of how it impacts working memory, because I have some thoughts about that, but I would really like to hear
Yeah.
from you.
Yeah. I definitely have thoughts about multitasking. I think we're all optimists in that regard. But, like it's one thing to be talking on your phone and doing, cooking dinner if it's a thing you know how to make. And also, let's be honest, the stakes are a little bit low. Like, don't burn the house down. It's probably fine. Um, but that's different from I'm doing like really kind of deep work, like brain intensive stuff where I really need to think about this and I need to really kind of take a lot of information in and I'm processing it and then I'm doing something smart as an output, right? In
Hmm.
that case, then talking on the phone, interruptions, phone calls, that, coworker being loud, I don't know, a loud truck rumbling down the road, right? That's what breaks that kind of working memory.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
multitasking depends a lot on the task and generally works best when at least one of the tasks is easy, but generally most of them are pretty easy and low resource intensive.
Hmm.
Um,
Right, like you could
so
talk on the phone and fold laundry. I mean, that's
yeah,
a low.
yeah,
Or you could talk on the phone and walk your dog,
yeah,
or maybe weed the garden or something like that. Like
right,
those aren't things that are actively engaging a really cognitive level. But when you're
yeah,
trying to do two cognitive levels, it's really difficult for the ADHD brain to maintain the sustained attention and the working memory that's needed to process the information and figure out where it's supposed to go.
yeah. I think there's also like, this is a little bit snarky, but I think there's a difference between I'm awesome at multitasking and I'm terrible at monotasking.
Say
Right?
more.
And
Yeah.
meaning, I think there are people who say I'm really good at multitasking, where really what they mean is I have a really hard time staying on just one thing, start to finish. I tend to jump around. I tend to have a lot going on.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a multitasky kind of a thing.
Hmm.
Therefore, I'm really good at it, you know? Um, and it like I get it. I understand kind of why they say it, but I think there is maybe a better option if they can get there is trying to be much more intentional about maybe when they're multitasking, but more to the point when they're monotasking. Like this is a monotasking kind of a job. I need
Yeah.
to really just focus on this one thing and then really resist the urge, the temptations, the distractions, anything that's going to suck your impulsivity, where you're like, ooh, um, and trying to sort of offload that stuff on really trying
Can I just
to,
interrupt you for 1 second,
yeah,
which is going to, of course, like that's one of the
yeah,
main problems of multi, because
yeah.
I just did something that
I'll
actually is
hold it
not
in
going to
my
help
working
you
memory.
hold it in your working
Yeah.
memory. Um, you talked about impulsivity. That is a really hard thing. Like,
Yeah.
you can say you just got to like manage your impulses. Like, I mean, some of my clients like basically say, I can't.
Yeah.
Like I can't. And so how do we help people learn how to do something that they believe that they cannot do because they haven't
Yeah.
been able to do it yet?
So the thing about this is the least helpful advice you can give someone is don't be impulsive. Um, the much, much better advice is get rid of your distractions and temptations, right?
Yeah,
Deal with the stuff out here so it doesn't
right.
pull you away. Because, and especially when it's just sort of like impulse, really impulsive, impulsivity is like it's leaping without looking. You're not saying like, hmm, let me reflect upon whether I should do this thing. I'm weighing the pros and cons, like I think, yeah, I'm going to do it. Like impulsivity is bam, away we go, right? Like, and it's only
Yeah.
afterwards that the awareness kicks back in, and then you're like, duh, why did I do that? So yeah, don't try to manage the impulsivity. Try to manage the distractions and
That,
temptations.
so that's a really important. So I'm going to pause for a second and say number one takeaway. Number one
Hmm.
takeaway. Manage the distractions that interfere with your ability to focus, to
Hmm.
solo task. Not do not expect say don't instead of saying to yourself, don't multitask, say to yourself, I need to manage the distractions that interfere with
Yeah,
my ability to solo task or focus on one thing at a time.
yeah,
If you've joined us for this Instagram, and I'm really excited that you're here, thanks. Put a question in the chat, make a comment. I really would love to hear from you. Where do you struggle with your working memory? Ari and I have been chatting up a storm because we're grooving on our conversation. But I would love to hear from you. What's your question about working memory? Where do you stumble? Because that's the beauty of the ADHD Hour on Instagram is that you can ask your questions to us, and we will answer them in real time. So I'm wondering, in terms of how could parents support partners support each other and parents
hmm,
support kids who struggle with working memory, because I find that reminders um, are a source of frustration. Like they're not
yeah,
actually like even the word I have to remind you. It's like, oh, right. It's like,
hmm,
I feel guilt, then I feel guilty, and you're in, particularly in partnership, it's like I had to remind
yep,
you to do blah blah blah. It's like, okay, well, we are not on an equal playing field. You are up here and I
yeah,
am one down. And so I think that I prefer to use the word cueing. Like what's going to cue you to move into action or to recall? So how can we offer suggestions for people that will assist them in their partners or their relatives or their children who struggle
yeah,
with working memory? I mean, to me, the number one thing is write things down. Like visual cueing is so important for people with ADHD. And even though so many of us cannot, get overwhelmed by lists, like I'll do a brain dump of a list and there'll be 15 items and then I have to do a separate list
Yeah.
of like, okay, which are the ones I have to do today? And I only have like three, four in them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay,
Of
I can do
course.
those four. Right. But I think that, because if we're asking people to rely on their brain information to on their brain to recall information, then we could be setting them up for a frustration. So
Hmm.
my first suggestion or tip would be write things down.
Yeah, I mean, anything to take it out of your brain and into the world, right?
Yeah.
Externalizing it, as it's called, whether it's
Yeah.
writing it down, highlighting things so the important parts jump out, visual reminders, setting an alarm that buzzes, any sort of way of taking it out of your head is probably going to work better than our onboard memory does. Um,
Hmm.
but I think it's also like looking at the relationship part of it, whether it's romantic partners who are equals or parents and kids who are not equals, it's still, I give the same advice, which is to have an actual conversation about the reminders. Because the challenge here is the non ADHD person looks at this and says, your track record tells me you tend to forget. Therefore, I must remind you because this needs
Hmm.
to be done.
Yeah.
Then the person with ADHD says, I mean, okay, I guess maybe, but like it annoys the crap out of me. I don't want to be pestered all the time. So like, give me some space. I got it. Right. And they're both right, because it sucks on both sides of that. So
Right.
I think it's better to have a real conversation about like, what is the best way? How should I say it? What words should I use? What's the best
Hmm.
time and place? How should I do reminders for you? Um, and, so like for the person being reminded to say, here's what I need. Now, for the non ADHD person, it doesn't mean you just take it as is. You might say, like, yeah, I don't know that that's really going to work for me. I don't feel like that's not really a thing I want to do. So, like, let's talk a little bit more about how we do reminders. But then the non ADHD person's job is to do the reminders the way that it was asked. But then the person with ADHD, their job is to then actually act on the reminder, right?
Mm.
If you did
Yeah.
it, asked it the way that I said I would like you to, and then I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
cool, and then I don't do it, like I'm not holding up my end of the bargain, right? And
Hmm.
doing it might mean here I am just doing the task, like, okay, I'm just going to get up, let me just do this. Or it might mean somehow setting a reminder or doing another thing to capture that. I had this conversation with a
Hmm.
couple 2 days ago. So it shows like I see you doing it, or you see me, whoever we are in this example,
Hmm.
right? But that this is a process, and like you're going to have to kind of find your way of doing this. So there's a nice
Hmm.
balance between non-ADHD partner not working too hard, not worrying too much about things not getting done, not paying too
Hmm.
much of the price of doing the things when they're not being done, but partner with ADHD feeling like they have some agency and they're driving their own bus and like, I got this. I'm not like a kid that you need to remind all the time,
Mm.
so finding something that works for
Right.
both.
It's interesting because I think that the power dynamic is really important to figure out. And of course, in my five C's, self-control, compassion, collaboration, consistency, and celebration. The third C, collaboration, means you have that conversation, and
Hmm.
that is important. I think certainly ask for even it's important for sure in partnerships, and it's also important in parent-child relationships because your child has some idea of what reminders work and what don't. And so maybe your child prefers a post-it.
Hmm.
Maybe a whiteboard makes sense. Maybe text is something that they'll pay attention to. Our goal is to reduce the memory load that our loved one has, and externalize it so the pressure inside to recall things is not building, which of course brings along its two best friends, stress and anxiety. So, and
Yeah.
then people are kind of incapacitated. So I think that all of those things help. The most important thing I want to, really encourage for people raising kids with ADHD and people living with ADHD is to remember, whether it's a motivation issue or a memory issue, to break tasks down into smaller steps and chunks. You might think that it's small to say to your 15-year-old, get your shoes and your backpack and I'll meet you in the car. And your 15-year-old might go upstairs and be like, "Oh, which shoes? I don't know. It could be these shoes. It could be that shoe. Oh, I really like this shoe. Oh, look what I found on the floor. This, piece of gum in a
Hmm.
wrapper that I would like to chew." I mean, like these things happen. And so that might be too complicated. I would hope for a 15-year-old that you could say, "Get your
Hmm.
shoes and I'll meet you in the car." That would be fine. But for an 8-year-old, that won't work. Right.
Yeah.
And so I really think that it's important that we remember that when we give a direction, when we are asking someone to remember something, to keep it nice and small. Otherwise, it's going to be blown out of the water by something else, anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that, working memory gets hijacked. You know,
Mm, yeah.
go up and get shoes, go up and get shoes, shoes and backpack. But, oh, dog, you know,
Yeah.
or like you said, like, oh, gum, this might still have flavor in it or whatever, right? And
Right.
that like
Exactly.
out it goes, right?
Right.
So, and I think that what's important here is to notice the times where the person with ADHD shoots himself in the foot, right? That it's not simply you'll
Mm,
only forget to do the stuff I ask you to do, right? Because then the
mm,
person's just selfish or lazy. But if they, do the things that they then are unhappy, right?
mm-hmm.
That it can maybe give a little bit more empathy and understanding and a
Mm-hmm.
recognition that like, okay, this is kind of a memory thing. So what do we need to do to support memory? Which is
Yes.
different from what do we need to do to support motivation. So like
Correct.
punishing someone for memory problems doesn't make their memory better. It just makes them more anxious, right?
Right.
So now I'm not going to say you don't punish your kids because obviously sometimes we do, and it is the right thing to do. But
You and I can
like,
have a separate conversation
okay,
about that because there's a difference between consequences,
yeah,
natural and
yeah,
logical
yeah,
consequences, and
consequences. We'll use that word.
punishment,
Yeah,
which doesn't teach any skills.
yeah,
So we'll
yep.
we'll
No,
put
I
that
agree.
aside for a minute.
No,
But
well,
you
I'll use
said something.
consequences instead. I'll go with you on that one. So,
Thank you.
yeah, like there should be consequences. Life has consequences. So,
Correct.
absolutely that. But saying I'm going to ground you, like you can't go out and play with your friends if you didn't do your homework, that could help with motivation, but it's not going to help them to remember to bring their homework, from school, you know? So, like, if that's where things are breaking down, we need a different solution for that problem. So then it
Right.
becomes a matter of how do we support your working memory when you're loading up your backpack that you
Mm-hmm.
also have to grab your math book and put it in, or, you know, run to the
That's
printer and grab it off the printer and put it in your binder for tomorrow or
right.
whatever.
Right. We call that the laminated list
Mm,
pinned to the back of the backpack. When I
yeah.
leave school, I need to make sure my backpack has these things. It's that
Yep.
visual cue with that list. But you said something about, noticing when things aren't working, which is very important in terms of structuring and creating interventions that work. I also want to do the flip side of noticing when things work because, so many people with ADHD, kids and adults, have a huge negative inner voice that
Mm,
tells them of all the ways that they are less than and messed up and unworthy. I mean, we could go on and on.
yeah.
But when we notice when our kids remember something, then that's a high five, right? So I talk about this thing when I teach working memory skills, what I call the rule of three. And then number one, you make eye contact. And if eye contact's uncomfortable for you or your child, you look right here.
Mm,
Number two, you state the direction. So you state the direction out loud. And number three, you ask them to repeat the direction, not once, but twice. Because once is that really quick
hmm.
zip-dee-doo-dah,
Yep.
short-term memory. And twice, it kind of heads into like the working memory area where you could actually hear it and do something with it. And then when it's done, that high five or great job or some positive acknowledgement of what they did, I think will encourage them the next time, or at least it'll put a drop in the bucket. Because the bucket of I'm worthy, I am lovable, I'm smart, and I'm capable generally has like a little tiny hole where all the water seeps out.
Yeah.
And so we want to try to, help them take that old piece of gum and put it on that hole
Hmm.
and fill that up. You did say something that I think would be worth talking about in terms of working memory. I mean, we're not going to talk about motivation today, but in terms of not being able to remember stuff, the idea of laziness. So I
Mm,
personally reject that word. I don't use that. I mean, it exists, so it's in the English vocabulary, but I reject it as a notion in conjunction with people who have ADHD or are neurodivergent, because laziness assumes that that there's sort of a I don't care about doing something, I don't want it. There's like a whole thinking about not doing, and I would say that people with ADHD don't. That's not what goes on for them. It's a kind of incapacitation. Like I don't think I can, or I don't believe I can, or I can't even remember what I was supposed to do from last time. And so that's this sort of, I'd like to steer us in that direction when we talk about that part of working memory, because working memory has been found to be related to emotional control, right? And people who have stronger working memory in research have been found to have stronger emotional control. Isn't that so interesting? You
hmm.
know, why do you think that is?
I think it's that if you can hold in mind, what am I doing? If you can hold in mind the future consequence, I
Mm,
think it's easier to then use that as a guide for how we nudge our emotions, right? Which could
hmm
be, this is really boring, but it sure would be nice to do it. And then some positive benefit comes maybe. So I will, bring about the emotion that motivates me here. Or you really piss me off and I'm about to let one rip on you, but I'm holding in mind that like, no, but that's not how I want to be. And I like you. And okay, you maybe piss me off, but like probably you have your
hmm
reasons. And, I'm going to hold on to the bigger picture here. And I think
mm.
that helps then not just like react to the emotion.
So you're able, so this is for me, what I've learned about working memory, is that, particularly in writing this book, is that what happens is that ideally your working memory can pull up an incident from the
Mm,
past that's related or similar to your current situation and say, hey, last time we did this, it didn't work so well. This time we're going to choose something else. And so if your working memory is weaker, or it, maybe, is on the slower side, it's not going to be able to pull that up fast enough. And then if the feeling that you're having is really intense, it's not strong enough to kind of hold back the
yeah,
tidal wave of emotion. And then the emotionality will drive behavior and so forth. And I think that can be really frustrating for people. Like they know cognitively, like if I say to a client, like, if you could rewind the situation, what
yeah.
would you do? And they were like, oh, I would not have yelled at my husband that way. I was like,
Hmm.
okay, what do you think got in the way? Couldn't think about it, was so mad at the time,
Yeah.
right? Couldn't remember what we had talked about. And I was like, you do know that we wrote it down on your phone. Like, who cared about my phone in that moment?
Sure.
So like that's the thing that I feel like is a part of working memory that we don't often talk about, that how it can help with emotional regulation, but it's a struggle for people.
Yeah, I mean it is because the challenge with strong emotions is they kind of take over.
Yeah.
That thing of we wrote it in, you wrote it in your phone. It's like I didn't even remember I had a phone. Like the phone was nowhere in my mind. It
Exactly.
was
What
like
phone?
that's it, laser focus right there. That is it. So
Right.
in that, part of ADHD is that, extra emotionality sometimes of sort of feeling your feelings more strongly. And,
Mm.
in some ways that makes people with ADHD super fun to hang out with, right? When it's all a good
Yeah.
time, it is great.
But
Um,
when it's not fun, it is really not fun. Like
yeah.
when and this happens, like yesterday, I noticed like I came home and I got this call from the vet that my dog might have, he has some sort of tick-borne illness
Mm,
or he tested positive for it, but they're not sure and they have to do a blood test. So I was like, I'm going to go downstairs. My husband was working out and I went downstairs and I, said, hey, I want you to listen to this phone call. And then I mentioned that, we're going away and that his pet sitter might have to pick up the medication. And then he like gave me some feedback that I didn't ask for about how I talked, and I was like, "Arr!" And I just said, I'm gonna take the dog for a walk. And I was
right,
walking the dog, and I was like, good thing I'm taking the dog for a walk because I need a whole loop around the
right,
park
right.
to diffuse and move forward. And then when I got back, I casually said, I didn't really like the tone of voice you used when you talked to me. And he says,
Yeah.
okay, well, I was trying to stop you from saying that. I was like, okay, well, didn't work. Right. But, like I had to actually, when we think about that, it's like my working memory, which is like, okay, what are you supposed to do in these situations when you want to kill your husband? Oh, you're going to go
Hmm.
for a walk with the dog. Okay. So I was able to like get like walk the
Yeah.
dog was what came up. And then the rest kind of followed. But I think that for people with ADHD, when there is a very strong negative emotion particularly, that to have like a very easily accessed one or two options that can allow your working memory to come back online will be helpful, because then it will allow you to think, okay, what does my future self want my present self to do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And often stop and walk away, or even just stop and look away, is
Or go
sometimes
to the
like
bathroom.
yes, yes, anything that takes you out of, is going to give you a little bit more breathing room, right? Because had
Yeah.
you stayed, you would not have said, "Hey, dear, I don't really like the way you talked to me back there." Those wouldn't have been the words, right?
No, no, and I'm not
Right.
saying what that would have been on Instagram
Yeah.
or anywhere
Yeah. Yeah.
public.
Yeah, it's a similar message, but a little more
A little
colorful.
different.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, but that's hard, right? Because life keeps moving and it moves fast. And it's,
Mm.
that like that pause it's really hard when it's emotionally provocative, and when it's people we are close to, it's even quicker that we react. Um, but it's also like that pause is like fundamentally what a big part of ADHD, right? It's that pausing, whether it's hold on a sec, do I want to say this? But it's the same thing as like, here I am paying attention to a meeting at work. What's that over there? Oh, who cares? La, la, la. I'm still here, as opposed to like getting hijacked over there and then missing the
Hmm.
boss saying,
Hmm.
most important part of this is whatever. And then you're like, or the kid who comes home from school and it's like, the teacher never said anything about the essay, right? And then like every other
Hmm.
kid somehow psychically, or they're on the secret group chat or something with the teacher. Um, so yeah, like that kind of hijacking is it's a common occurrence.
It really is. And I'm just going to take a pause here. Again, if you're joining us live and you have some questions about your working memory or questions about emotional regulation and how this rolls out in your life, please ask your question, make a comment. We'll be happy to answer it. And I want to remind you to check out my website, www.drsharonsaline.com, for more resources, and check out Ari's new website. Ari, what is your website?
So mine is drarituckman.com. So,
Okay. And
yeah.
he redid it and it's fabulous as well. So check it out. There's lots of stuff there for you. So let's sort of we're heading into the home stretch here. What are some misconceptions people have about forgetfulness and ADHD? So, that's an interesting label,
Yeah,
forgetfulness. Can we talk about that word a little bit?
sure.
Doc? Um,
So often the line I use is your memory is only as good as your attention, right?
Mm,
In that, in
mhm.
other words, if you didn't pay attention in the first place while it happened, there's no information that comes into working memory, processed a little bit, and then passed back to long-term memory, right? It never goes back to
Right,
the hard drive. So
right.
it looks like a memory problem, right? Like, I don't know, I don't remember. But it's really more of an input problem. It's more of an attention
Mm,
problem.
mm,
Um, so, but that's actually kind of good, I think, because there's more we can do to improve your attention than there is to improve your like inherent memory capacity. So like this is actually
mhm,
the right problem to have. In that, by really being intentional about your attention so that you can take information in, really sort of think about it, do something with it, and then put it back. It's like that old
mhm.
advice, like when you meet someone at a party and they're like, "Hi, my name is," and you're like, "Okay, cool." And then like a millisecond later, you're like, God damn it, what the hell's their name again? Right? That like the advice you're supposed to be like, Sharon, nice to meet you. So Sharon, what do you
Right.
think about the drapes and or whatever,
Like,
right? Like,
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're supposed to like use their name so it like
Stays
gets
in
stuck
there.
back in long term memory. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Although I have to say, as I get older, sometimes it takes me a little longer. Like I see someone I haven't seen for a long time. I'm
Yeah.
like, ooh, almost
Yep.
here. Almost here. I'm
Yep.
waiting for the
Yep. Yep.
train. The train is coming. I know it's coming. And then there it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I think that forgetfulness is such a negative connotation. Like, oh, you forgot I'm forgetful. Instead of, I have challenges, retaining information that are biological. I mean, I know that's a long thing to say, but it's like, I
Mm.
have memory challenges. Instead of, like forgetfulness, there's kind of like there's just like there's a just a this negative connotation, like there's something less than about you, there's
Mm.
something wrong with you because you forgot something, when in reality, you're trying to recall it, it's just not accessible to you.
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on the connotation, right? Like anything,
Mhm.
and whether
Yeah.
it's one person talking to another or someone talking to themselves, right? So I kind of often recommend, besides like the obvious, like what are things I can do to remember better, is also the other thing I recommend kind of equally is just sort of owning and moving on, right? So if you see someone, you're like, "Ah, man, I forgot," to just say like, Doc, damn it, I know your name. Tell me again. Um, and then you just move on, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Or if, you're in a meeting with someone and someone says something and it totally doesn't register, to just be like, all right, sorry, I totally lost that. Say that again. What was that
Yeah.
thing you just said? Um, and again, like addressing it, own it, but then moving
Yeah.
on, right? Not make a big production of it, just sort of acknowledge
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and
and
that's important. I'm going to interject here. That's so important. Not making a big deal about it. It's like,
mhm,
okay, and move on. And like that would be my number two. Like we talked about, like distractions, and then just acknowledge and move on, rather than I'm so stupid and the perspiration
yeah,
and the red face. It's just like, okay, thanks a lot. Move on. Yes,
mhm,
and. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Okay.
don't beat yourself up for it. Or
Mm-hmm.
even just, I mean, depending on the person, the situation, but just sort of say like, hey, so I'm really bad at remembering to do stuff. So if you ask me to do something and I don't do it, just just ping me again. Right? No big deal. I'm happy to
Mm.
be, and that what it does is a couple of things. I mean, first of all, you're not revealing any secrets because they've probably already figured out you're not good at remembering stuff. So like, whatever. But what it does is it gives the other person the agent, the permission, and therefore the agency to do the thing that will make their life better, right? If you're
Mm-hmm.
waiting for me to get you something and you're annoyed and it's screwing up your workflow, that's bad for you. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
if I told you, like, look, just send me a text or just ask me, like, it's totally cool, and you
Mm-hmm.
do it, which is really easy for you. It's not a big deal to ask someone, hey, remember that?
Yeah.
And then you get what you want. It's a pretty good trade off, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think it just being kind of direct and upfront about it, it makes the situation into not really an issue.
Hmm. Hmm. I like that because essentially you're cutting them off at the pass. You're
Mm,
you're you're owning that that this is a challenge for you before it becomes a challenge. So I have a question for our participants. What is something that you struggle to remember? Your names, appointments, passwords, why you walked into a room, something else. Put it in the chat. What is something that you struggle to remember? And I'm going to ask you that question too.
yeah.
Ari, what do you struggle to remember?
It's funny you mentioned recipes earlier because like I'm often like I'll be like, okay, three-quarters of a teaspoon or whatever, right? And then I walk over here and I'm like, ah, damn it, what was that again? So like, I don't know. I'm not a great cook. I'll make you a mean cocktail. That I'll do, but I'm not a great cook. So I think I don't have like a framework where it like fits
Mm-hmm.
into place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So stuff like that, I'm doing a lot more checking of the recipe. So,
Okay. So you
um,
check the recipe. Anybody,
yeah,
when if you just joined, what is something that you struggle to remember? Names, recipe, items, appointments, passwords, why you went into a room, something else.
stuff,
What do you
reading
struggle to
books.
remember? Huh.
Yeah.
I think I struggle to remember. Well, I struggle. Generally, my memory is pretty good, but I will struggle sometimes now because it's kind of clouded with a lot of stuff to remember the name of something from the past
Mm,
that I haven't used in a while. Like, oh, I feel like it's like a cliche. That movie with that actor. Which actor? The tall one who's bald.
right. Right.
I need a little more
Yeah.
information. So,
Yeah.
and
He's
and
somewhere
what I
between 20
notice.
and 70.
Exactly, exactly. We have somebody who said that they struggle with geography. I rely too much on my GPS, like where I
Mm,
am, my location. I thank God for GPS. Honestly, I think it's one of the best inventions in the whole world. And I was thinking about this recently because I was driving with it and I was lost. And I was thinking about how, when I was in my 20s, I had this job where I taught electricity to kids. It was like I worked for the electric company and I would go to
wow.
schools and I would show this film about how electricity works and give them little booklets, and then we go through the booklets. And these schools were all over Boston. I was living in Boston at the time, and I had to there was no GPS when I was 25. It was a map, and I'm like in the car with the paper and the map
Right.
trying to figure out where I'm going. You have to pull over, and it was so very different. So thank goodness for
That,
GPS. Yes.
that is such a great working memory test, right? Because you look at the map or the directions if it's written,
Right.
and you're
Hmm.
like, okay, go to Walnut Street in a mile, right? And then take a left. And then you look for the brown building and then you take a right. So you're holding this in mind while
That's
you're
like five
looking and
chunks,
driving.
Ari. It's
I know.
five chunks.
I know. And then you probably have music on and maybe there's someone talking next, right? And you're like, it is a great working memory test that we all failed. So like,
Right.
yeah, I agree. Thank God for GPS. You're like, I'm lost. I don't care. Click, click. Take me home, Google.
And it
So,
doesn't humiliate you either. It doesn't say, Sharon, that was such a stupid idea to turn
right.
left. Why did you do that? It just says recalculating.
Yeah.
Recalculating. And I think that would be such a great thing for all of us to say in terms of everything, but particularly if we don't remember something. Like instead of shaming ourselves, like what's wrong with you that you can't remember this, and how come your working memory isn't really working. It would be nice if we could say, okay, where are my tools? How am I managing
Hmm.
my distractions? How am I writing things down so I don't have to hold it all in my head and deal with the pressure of that? Do I have consistent routines so that I don't really have to think in the morning? Like my habits have stacked into a routine. These are the things that help us manage our working memory, and of course, limiting multitasking, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Especially like in moments of transition, when you're
Mm,
going from one thing to another, to like sort of take a sec and like in a very intentional way rather than a like, oh, I gotta go. That's a
right.
really good way to have some just go like knock out the back end of your working memory, and then you leave and you forget something or whatever. So yeah,
Mhm.
trying to just even just for like 2 seconds, just like take a moment to calm down and then sort of think about what you're doing and what you need to bring.
Right, because when you slow down, then your brain actually can function more optimally. You
Hmm.
said something about directing your attention. Like I forget what it was, but it was really beautiful. Do you remember what it was? You said something about like you remember
Uh,
where your attention is, what you've paid attention to. Like when you pay, I think it was something like when you pay attention is where you what you'll recall.
yeah, your memory is only as good as your attention.
That one, yep.
So,
That would be the third
yep,
tip. Yep.
yep,
Yep.
yep.
That's really good. Your memory's as good as your attention. If you have any other comments or any questions that you have for us, if you want to share something that you forget and you would really like a tip for, we have 2 minutes left. So this is a great time. I want to sort of point out that Ari said something really important, which is this idea of having a lot going on in your environment that can be distracting, and that if you can get quiet, and then you can listen inside to what to sort of what comes up that you have to recall, and you're not as distracted. You can hold information in your mind. So there's a difference between sort of like a background kind of a thing and a music that is overwhelming your senses, it sounds like.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You also mentioned something that I think is really important for us to wrap with, which is about sleep. Sleep is critical for attention and memory and executive functioning and mood. And you talked about how important it is to get good sleep. Maybe we should come back sometime and just talk about sleep. I would love to do that.
yeah.
Would you do that with me?
Sleep is such a big, important topic. It affects so many things. And it's
Hmm.
also hard to get good
Yeah.
sleep for a big variety of reasons. So I am
Hmm.
always happy to talk about sleep because it's like, I don't know. I pester my clients all the time about sleep. So yes,
Great. That sounds great. Well, thank you for joining me. This was really fun.
I
This
know.
is the first time I've had someone join me, and you're like the best person to do it.
Well, this
Um,
is great. I appreciate it.
really great talking with you. So again, tell us where people can find you.
So my website is drarittuckman.com, and obviously here on Instagram as well, at Ari Tuckman PsyD. So got a bunch of good stuff going there as well.
And you can find me on my website with lots of resources, new ones that I put up all the time, drsharonsaline.com, but it's drsharonsaline.com.
Yep, me too.
We're going to be taking next month off from the ADHD hour, but I'll see you again in September. And thanks, Ari, so much. You're
Yeah, thank
so
you.
wise, and you're such a dear, dear friend. I really appreciated spending time with you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It was a nice excuse for us to hang out and talk a bit. So glad
Yeah,
glad to be here.
really great. Thanks. Bye, everybody.